Hello and welcome to We the People. When you and I go to a doctor, in many ways we are surrendering our lives for that moment into his or her hands. But doctors are not gods. The question is, while everyone makes a mistake, what if that mistake is a result of carelessness? A watershed judgment from the Calcutta High Court has reopened a debate for India's medical community. This judgment has actually decided that 17 doctors associated with a hospital in West Bengal will now stand criminal trial. The court has found them a prima facie needing to be investigated for a case that involves medical negligence. The story, of course, started when Dr. Kunal Saha, a US-based doctor, decided to launch this crusade for his wife. She was only in her 30s when she died. She went to a doctor because she had a skin rash, and then, according to Dr. Saha, the steroid that she was administered played a part in her eventually dying. Dr. Saha is joining us now from the United States of America. Dr. Saha, why did you decide that this was a case that needed to be taken right to the top? Your fight has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Why was this particular fight so important to you? Obviously, it involved your wife. You loved her very much, but you've been fighting this now for years and years.
You know, my wife and I went to India for 2 weeks vacation in 1998. Just at the threshold of starting a family life. We both just graduated and built a career in US as a young couple. She was only 36. Then she died in the most incomprehensible manner. I'm a doctor myself from India. So the way she was killed by the so-called top doctors, I could not believe it in front of my own eyes. But then I felt my wife is not dead, she is physically dead, but she is with me till today. And she sent me a message that people like these are dying in our motherland. We lived in US, but we are Indians. And the way her life was taken away, a lot of Anuradhas are dying since then. So it's a crusade for me because I felt that my wife came to my life. We met, we got married for this purpose. I'm a doctor, but I'm a victim. I'm an American, but I'm an Indian. That's why I could fight this seemingly impossible battle. For ordinary Indian, they can't fight because the whole stack is against them. The legal system is so long and cumbersome and expensive in India. And then the medical council, the judgment last week by Calcutta High Court involves medical council of West Bengal, which is supposed to protect the patients. Now remember, they never treated my wife, so they are not guilty directly for medical negligence, for which other doctors are guilty. Supreme Court has held so. But they protected these doctors. They could have prevented this if medical councils do what they're supposed to do, to take disciplinary action, to cancel license of the guilty doctors. Then our country's condition won't be what it is today, the healthcare. You see the reports, news every day. People are dying, patients are dying in hospitals from what seemingly reckless negligence. So many of them may not be actual cases of negligence. But you have to admit, when there are so many cases, some of them are brazen.
But can I ask you, Dr. Saha, you're a doctor yourself, you've done considerable research in the area of HIV. Many doctors here that we speak to also complain that if there is so much litigation, if they're constantly dragged, for example, into court cases, they will never really be able to innovate if they have to. They will never be experimental. They will never try new things because they'll always be scared of the next court case. How do you respond to that argument or that concern?
Nobody is dragging doctors. I mean, the number of negligence is way outnumber how many cases are being filed in India. In US, there are against doctors a lot of frivolous cases, and a lot of people, they know that. But is that the reason? US medical standard of medicine is by far the highest, much better than India. So if that logic worked, then US medical standard could have been far worse. You don't have to drag them to the court if medical council works. And public in India would not. Because they don't have resources, they can't fight in the court of law. Yes, I have won, but then how I have won? I had to go all the way to Supreme Court numerous times, and only in the Supreme Court I won. So, and I spent crores and crores. And then the doctors community in India, even the good doctors, they don't come forward to testify truthfully.
Yes, and you make the point about doctors refusing to testify against other doctors, and that might actually be at the heart of the debate we're going to have, Dr. Saha. So let me take that straight to Anand Grover. How much of a watershed is this judgment? We've had other judgments in the past. You've had a judgment from Justice Karju, I think in 2009, that said that an error of judgment by a doctor is not the same thing as negligence. You have Dr. Saha making the point that nobody was willing to testify, but he doesn't accept the charge that this will lead to doctors being dragged through court. Yet I'm sure many doctors will express that concern.
It's practically impossible for patient litigants to succeed in court. Like for example, I'm from Bombay, now I'm in Delhi. If you file a suit in the Bombay High Court, it won't see the light of day for 20 years. The medical councils have completely failed. They protected doctors. Dr. Saha is absolutely right. In most countries that happens, but in India it's much more so. The other thing is litigation is very expensive. Consumer courts are available, but consumer courts are much below par. And you know, negligence is a complicated issue. It's to do with standard of care, and the standard of care keeps evolving. And what is the standard of care is what has to be determined. You need expert evidence for that by a patient litigant, and that means doctors who are not ready to satisfy. It's very difficult. Most litigants are afraid of courts. The legal system is actually broken down in terms of ordinary litigation.
What does this verdict change, if at all? Because I can also see many doctors being very worried that 17 doctors are standing criminal trial.
Well, if it, unfortunately or fortunately, negligence is both civil and criminal. If they have, and this is not the people who, as rightly Dr. Saha says, who operated, they protected, that's a criminal act. They have to stand. They haven't done their job. And it's corruption actually. I'll just give you my own example. It's nothing to do with the fact that people are bad. The system is structured in such a way that it's a factory. Even in an outpatient clinic, if you go like I did for an allergy that I thought I had, you just don't get proper service because the doctor has no time. And this is me who's enlightened about medicine, etc. So you have a major problem. And in hospitals, there is a saying that if you go to a leading hospital, if you're over 70, they go there to die, and they make a lot of money out of it. And that's a fact. I have had 2 experiences with my own in-laws. So it's a very bad situation, and you need to correct it. I don't think negligence in terms of criminal route is the best route, but there has to be remedies.
Dr. Kulera, this business of doctors just not having the time. Like, nobody thinks that a doctor would have malafide intentions. I don't think any of us are suggesting, you know, nobody wants to be negligent. Nobody wants to be careless. But when Anand Grover says that doctors just don't seem to have the time today, the fact of the matter is that you'd be lucky if your doctor spends 15 minutes talking to you. Do you believe that that's the problem, that medicine is in danger of becoming an assembly line factory?
I don't think so. I think it's important to understand first that doctors are not gods. 2, patients will die in hospitals. 3, doctors are human beings. We empathize very strongly with our patients. Most of us will weep when our patients don't do well. We carry home our complications. If your patient has a major crisis, you don't sleep well that night, your phone keeps ringing, you're up in the hospital. And of course, we may be a little bit tight for time because there are just so many patients. We still try to be very equitable in our distribution of time. And I think it doesn't take a doctor long to make out who requires expert attention and who may not require too much attention. Crux of the matter is that most doctors are humans. We do commit mistakes. You know, we're not taught to harm patients. Our basic job is to cure patients.
What does this verdict say to you? As a doctor, do you think it's a good sign, it's a good wake-up call, or do you believe that while the community needs a wake-up call, the criminal route is not necessarily the best route?
I think this verdict is important because it's important for the medical councils in this country. And I think they have to be far more alert, because medical councils ultimately have to remember that they are responsible to the population. It's important to remember that if you have the GMC in England or in the UK, they would respond in a far more democratic manner, because it's important for the people to have faith in the medical council. And I think this is not a verdict against doctors like Sir said. It's basically against the fact that people try to cover up charges and try to cover up the entire evidence against the doctor, which really wasn't required.
Okay, Katie Tulsi, do you accept that in a sense a cleansing of the system is needed? You've had the medical council previously embroiled in all kinds of controversies. You've had its head actually ousted for reasons of impropriety and corruption allegations. Where is that line between the accountability of the doctor but not burdening the doctor with the responsibility that he or she can't possibly live up to?
Firstly, I want to point out that there is a contradiction in what Dr. Saha said. In one sentence he says that it's incomprehensible as to how she died. and then he says, no, she was killed.
No, in his case, he's actually argued that the steroid that she was administered was well above the prescribed dosage. And it's a very detailed case. I did not get into the technicalities of it while introducing it. But Dr. Saha has detailed that the steroid injection that she was given is what Anuradha Saha reacted to. So it's quite well detailed. I don't think he's actually being contradictory about what he believes to be the cause of death.
But I find that the doctors, it's just another human mind working on another human body. How the body is going to react, it really depends on hundreds of factors. But the doctor is supposed to not give you overdose of a steroid. For criminal charge of negligence under 304A also, it has to be gross negligence. Your conduct of the matter was such which is not acceptable to the protocol at all. No, but if there are alternative systems of treatment and the doctor chooses to adopt one merely because this was more risky, he can't be held liable of negligence. He may adopt a certain procedure which may be more risky, but at that time...
Anand Grover, come in there. I think that what Justice Kaju actually says is that if you're actually, in his judgment, is that if you are employing a mode of treatment that is accepted by your peers to be a reasonable mode, even if they disagree with it, that's not negligence.
You're right.
But this case is different.
No, you are right. You see, what is known as standard of care, or what you call the mode of treatment, is set by your peers, right?
Yes.
But there's another element which also is part of negligence, and that is you have to inform the patient and get consent. That is what is lacking in India. With all due respect to the medical profession, until HIV came along, they said, what is the need for doing that? In some countries, lack of consent itself is battery and negligence. There may be two standards of treatment. You can choose an alternative. But even then, when the treatment requires anything to be done to the patient, you have to take consent, and that is settled law in the Supreme Court. Informed consent. What are the risks? What are the benefits? And what are the consequences? Once that is informed, something goes wrong, doctor is not
every
liable.
case can actually be sliced up many different ways, Mr. Tulsi. But Dr. Dang, what are the larger ramifications of the debate we're having today? The fact of the matter is that people either blindly trust their doctors or today don't trust them at all.
You have to trust a doctor. You have to have...
No, most people do because they don't know any better.
The problem here arises is that since the time the medical profession came under the Consumer Protection Act, doctors are being equated not only with doctors as they used to be, they are being treated like any other businessman. So as a result of which the doctors themselves have to practice defensive medicine. They have to go in for maybe unnecessary investigations.
Like what?
Like the fact that patient walks in, they have to ask for certain battery of investigations. It may be path investigation, there may be logical investigations. Why? Because of the fact that they have to have protective medicine. Because they want to protect their own diagnosis. The good old clinical skills which are there. I think lots of doctors still do have them.
You're saying the battery of tests is being ordered to cover their tracks?
Yes. Because the patient can easily turn back and say that why did you not ask for this? And as Anand was saying, I will slightly disagree with him and say that he said that doctors do not testify against doctors. They do. If they had not been testifying, how come this case would have reached its ultimate...
But you know, Dr. Dang, it's very interesting. But it's very interesting that you say this, because I did ask Dr. Saha about this. Dr. Saha, the point about being able to prove that it was actually negligence requires the testimony of other doctors. How difficult was that for you, Dr. Saha, to prove that and to get other doctors on board?
Absolutely, I had difficulty. I didn't get anybody in India to come forward and testify, but I got worldwide doctors' opinion based on which I won. Worldwide doctors said it is unheard of the way these doctors get the medicine to my wife. It's unheard of in medical science. But you see, these last week's judgment, those medical council behind closed door, what they did, they said, no, we obtained our local opinion and there was no negligence. It's a science. No, there was negligence. They suppressed the facts, and that's why they have been charged with criminal conspiracy last week, and High Court upheld my petition. So you see, these doctors, this unscrupulous one. There are a lot of good doctors. My father was a doctor. All my friends are doctors. But then the good doctors are behind. They are not coming forward. They must step forward today, and they must take the helm of healthcare. Not these corrupt ones, okay, But that's the situation of our country. Until medical councils are reformed, until the good doctors, there are many, okay, in India, they step forward. Yes, some of them must be punished. The real bad ones must be.
So you're basically saying that the good doctors don't step forward. Meera Shiva.
See, there's medical negligence, then there's medical malpractice, which is also, you know, significant and a much greater problem. Yeah. And then you have, say, medical negligence, and I say this error of judgment, I totally agree, that should not be, you know, put in the same basket as this. The concern is, you know, if you do not have medical orders, social orders, prescription orders, which is, you know, a little bit keeping an eye on what is going on, and Medical Council of India, as has been mentioned, is not doing what it should be doing. What happens is that, you know, I shouldn't call them rotten tomatoes, but once in a blue moon, medical negligence is one thing. People who are doing it, you know, repeatedly, and that is part of their functioning and behavior. And I want to give one or two examples. A lot of women died in Jodhpur Medical College in maternity. Why did that happen? Because if they say the IV fluid, the men also got the IV fluid. Lot of maternal deaths that take place. Even if a sincere doctor wanted to give, because somewhere at the backup these things are missing. My own friend, my colleague, she had breathless, a viral infection, which complication was myocarditis. They took X-ray, they said nothing wrong. The long and short of it is she started getting so breathless and sigh nose, no oxygen in the nursing home. She goes to another one, she's put on an oxygen with cylinder empty. By that time pupils dilated and she died.
Let's hold that thought, because you're talking about systemic shortages, and Kavita Narayan, this is something you've studied closely. You've actually looked at how shortages is something that we don't even talk about. Absolutely. I think 63 to 64 lakhs ancillary health services was something that you found missing.
I'll give you a few statistics, Barka, which will probably help you know, sort of clarify this. You know, listening to Dr. Saha there, which is, you know, great, but it sort of makes me feel like I'm back in the US 4 years ago. I ran hospitals in the United States for over a decade. And, you know, I'm very afraid that, you know, much as these judgments, this is great, you know, it's great because I think we're starting to look at negligence very closely. We don't want to become a sue-happy society. And, you know, we've got to be very clear that there are
we don't want to be a society that drags the doctors to court.
That drags doctors, you know, without giving them the system and without giving them the tools and without making sure there are enough people in the system to sort of take care of it.
What worries you about the US model?
The fact that, you know, this whole idea of, like I call it, right, I call it the sue-happy society. We sued, you know, we've been sued as an administrator. I have deposed several times against, on behalf of the hospital, on behalf of doctors. And what happens is people started suing because they figured there's a huge non-economic damages component that sort of kept going out of control, which is why the US is probably going to end up spending, you know, what we think is close to 25% of their GDP, you know, at some point on health. But a huge part is because of the amount of money that goes into insurance. And, you know, the insurance folks makes money. Now, I'm not saying, we are at the absolute extreme end.
Yeah, right? We are at the other end of the spectrum.
We as a country, just in terms of statistics, quick statistics, have, you know, less than one doctor for, you know, less than, you know, 2,500 people, which is 10x worse than almost even our neighboring countries, you know, several of the nations. We are in dire doctor shortage, dire nursing shortage.
And when your study found that 63 lakh allied health,
64 lakh allied health professionals, which is everybody, but, you know, who we quantified as
there was a shortage of 63 lakh allied health professionals.
Yes, but my point is that there is a huge set of skills and competencies that we need to start looking at in terms of not just these allied health folks, but even for the doctors. You know, the best of the best are here. But what about the tons of who are coming out of all of these schools, you know, mom and pop colleges that are churning out doctors? Those are probably the doctors that ended up, you know, administering the wrong drug, right? Where is the system in place to make sure that the person has been testified and, you know, you're checking off on a set of skills before the person comes out?
So you're saying it's a systemic problem. Dr. Amit Sengupta, let me take that to you. When you hear Kavita make the point that you cannot become this society which just litigates, would you agree?
No, first of all, I don't think it's fair to compare with the American situation. It just so happens that Dr. Saha lives in the United States, but I don't think there is any parallel to this. The bigger issue here is that probably we are underplaying the issue. The scale of malpractice, the scale of medical negligence in India is of a far higher order than you find in the United States.
How do you reach that conclusion statistically? Because actually we look for statistics and we couldn't find any.
I mean, that's exactly the point. That if you will be able to get statistics if there is an attempt to collect data. We do not today have the regulatory mechanisms to collect data, there is no intent to collect data, so you don't have data, so you turn around and say there is no data about this. But ask anybody in private, any doctor in private who has an iota of ethics left, and I would say that most doctors want to practice ethically.
Yes.
And you ask them in private and they will tell you number of stories of how ethics is violated every day in almost every facility. The systemic problem has various reasons.
Dimensions, yeah.
But the two major reasons is one, the regulatory deficit. So people think that they can get away with anything. Even if you're competent, you can get away with not doing what you're supposed to do. And third, you can get away with malpractice in order, which is motivated. So it is not just negligence, but motivated because you stand to gain profit from it today.
So you're basically saying that the MCI, for example, not just various people.
MCI is just one body, but there are several other
regulatory bodies. The self-regulation in the medical community is not.
No, the self-regulation has never worked. In fact, the medical community has always complained about the Consumer Protection Act. The problem is that if they had actually self-regulated, then you wouldn't have required the Consumer Protection Act to apply to them.
Dr. Soin, if I can bring you in now, the fact is that many doctors at some point have somebody who's unhappy with them, have somebody who will take them to court, have somebody who will file a case against them. That's happened to you. That has probably happened at different stages to many doctors. How does a doctor deal with that?
See, one thing has to be clear, that if you're functioning in a system, in a hospital, in a team, then there have to be protocols, there have to be standard guidelines, there have to be best practice guidelines which are used. And if 99% of the patients make it and 1% patients don't, then you have to look very deeply if for that 1% of the patients, did you actually follow those guidelines? So you have to look at it internally within the department, then you have to look at it internally within the hospital, and then you should have a totally impartial outside body that looks at it. And if there have been some deficits in protocol, sure, you have to change the next time around. And I think the audit is a very, very important thing, and it is grossly underutilized. In fact, almost non-existent in this country.
Who should do the audit?
Well, again, it starts internally, then goes externally, and then goes to the regulatory authorities.
K.T.S. Tulsi, the point is this, that the way the system is right now, you are actually being scrutinized by your peers. For example, when Dr. Saha said that he couldn't get any of the doctors in India to actually endorse what he was saying, and he had to get a global medical perspective because he couldn't get it in India. Now, do you think that that's a reasonable model?
I don't think this is fair, but we have a peer group. The Medical Council is a peer group. And Medical Council.
But do you think Medical Council has worked?
Medical Council works outstandingly. I have appeared before the Medical Council, and
nobody is believing you.
I will support what he's saying.
You're saying it's worked outstandingly? You heard what Dr. Saha said about the Medical Council.
I'll not say it has worked outstandingly, but it definitely does serve a purpose.
At the moment you have the Medical Council of West Bengal, part of this verdict, not just the doctors.
There are some.
That's bizarre that the peers are being prosecuted for expressing an opinion.
Covering up.
They are aware of the shortcomings of the system. They are aware of the constraints. Now their opinion is being overturned, and they are being made into accused. This has never happened. I can't imagine that members of the Bar Council or the members of the Medical Council can be prosecuted for expressing an opinion. It's a quasi-judicial function. There could have been an appeal, but to prosecute them is bizarre.
Anand,
this is
I'm sorry, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Tulsi. The issue is they actually, in a corrupt, motivated way, protected a person who had done wrong. That is not expressing an opinion. Secondly, let us be very candid about it. Both the Medical Council and the Bar Councils have become defunct. I will tell you, the amount of corruption in the Bar Councils is pathetic. You can't get... please let me finish that. No, Medical Council is the same. You can't get doctors to testify. Actually, I want to...
So Anand, are you saying that you don't agree with the model? Are you saying that you don't agree with the model?
I think if you get an opinion from outside, it's okay. But I think the gentleman there is perfectly right. You need to have layers. First layer is the audits. The second is you have to clean the system, because you don't want to drive people to the court. So if the Medical Council system works, you need to clean it up.
But you haven't said why you think it's not working.
Because the whole system has become corrupt.
I'll strongly protest against the statement of Dr. Anand, The medical no, there is not. I can
Dr.
corruption is
Dr. Dang, you are the former MCI chief booted out because of corruption.
No, I'm talking about today. I'm talking about as per se.
Yes, at the moment it's the best.
At the moment I can say that there's not even a single corrupt person in the Delhi Medical Council.
Let me reframe my question, Dr. Dang. Does a model where accountability depends on someone in their community accepting that you have a case, can that model work? Because won't it be the instinct of doctors to protect doctors, just as it's the instinct of journalists to protect journalists and lawyers to protect lawyers? Is it a workable model? That's all I'm asking.
It's a workable model. A patient who has been subjected to some kind of what he feels is negligence, he is most welcome and open to appeal to Delhi Medical Council. In Delhi Medical Council, there is something called an executive committee of Delhi Medical Council. The executive committee decides certain cases on their own, or which they feel are beyond the level of competence. They call experts, and the experts are mainly from the government hospitals.
But how often would those experts want to testify against another doctor? Because wouldn't they feel that ye galti mujhse bhi ho sakti thi?
You can't leave it to a police sub-inspector to decide on medical negligence.
Who's even suggesting that?
No one suggesting that.
I don't know why you are...
That was the system before this.
Okay, Dr. Guleria is wanting to come in. Dr. Guleria, then Dr. Soin, then Dr. Amit.
I have testified a number of times in the Delhi Medical Council, and I'll tell you, you actually understand the situation the doctor has operated in.
And that's my point. Won't there be an instinctive sort of taking sides?
You can make out in a minute whether this is negligent or because medicine is not a perfect science, things can go hopelessly wrong, and that's easy for any doctor who's practiced medicine to understand. You can see the best patients can come and die in hospital, the worst can go out alive.
Amit Sen Gupta.
I think first of all I find it absolutely bizarre that somebody as senior as Mr. Tulsi can say that Medical Council of India is doing an outstanding work. I mean, it's one of the few institutions where a few years back its head was thrown into jail for a range of corruption cases, and that was the tip of the iceberg.
That gentleman was never in any disciplinary committee.
Dr. Guleria is saying. Which is, I entirely agree that it's in medicine is not a perfect science. In fact, people can have even argued that is it even a science at the moment. And there are judgments that you will have to make which are only clear to your peer group. And that is precisely the reason, just as the peer group knows where things have gone wrong, it also knows and understands how best to cover up things when things have gone wrong. And unfortunately, often you have this conspiracy of silence. It becomes it's not even an old boys and girls, it's just an old boys club, often.
Can I just take that to Kavita for a second, and then I'll come to you, Dr. Soin. There's an important point being made here, and a lot of people would feel that. If you were a doctor, you understand that only my peers can comprehend that split-second judgment, that possible mistake. Everybody can look back at something and saying, oh, I wish I tried it differently. But Amit Sen Gupta is also making an important point that it's too clubby.
But again, I need to go back to that point, Varka, which is, there needs to be more than just the doctor. Because it's, again, I think in India, we are still with this whole thought of, only doctors can run the system. Doctors are the only ones who can look at doctors. Very often, there are also other, there are lawyers that are looking at the case, right? Who we also consider very adequately trained. One of the things that has worked in some places is a multi-stakeholder. When you look at, sort of other trained people, you look at an administrator, you look at somebody that's trained in policy, you look at a multi-group of people that are actually looking at what this decision is. I'm not suggesting by any means we get, the sub-inspector that's, failed class 12 and coming in.
Was that actually the system?
That was the system. That the doctor could be arrested at the whim of a sub-inspector.
Before Justice Karjun
on a complaint, yes.
Right.
And this was introduced by the Supreme Court.
Again, we're not going back to saying that's the right way to do it. But I think this old boys club is very, very true. Which is it is.
Tulsi, what do you do with that criticism? And I'm saying you could apply it to us in the media. You could apply it to you in the legal profession. There is an instinct for people to rally around their own, even if they don't like them personally, because you feel this could happen to you, we're being misunderstood.
Medical profession is too technical. When I had to argue a case before the medical council, I had actually to witness an open heart surgery. No one else, no other discipline can sit in judgment over the medical professionals. It has to be the peer group.
Anand, do you accept that it can be nobody but peers who can
No, because I mean the whole thing is contradictory.
You don't agree with that?
No, because it's not correct. Judges who are not medical professionals are judging because the medical negligence has occurred.
Yeah.
This argument
is absurd. Because there is enough medical opinion there.
But no, please, I'm also sorry to say that other people are adequately trained to look into this, because the doctors will depose as to the current medical practice in any field. Yeah. If it is below that, and that anybody else can judge, but not the opinion what is the current medical practice, then it becomes negligent. You don't need a trained doctor to decide that secondary issue. But judges who are not people who are doctors, they are deciding.
Judges are getting into it after the first stage. The judge will not entertain it till a doctor of the peer community has said that there is a valid complaint.
No, not valid
complaint.
The
peer is being prosecuted.
No, the peers, unfortunately, I have this situation in South Africa also. There also there is the same problem. Doctors are not deposing against doctors. This is a common problem in developing countries because things are too close. But I think we have to go away from that and see what are the positive things that we can actually put in place. First is the audits, the self and the external audit. Yeah. The second is, I think the medical councils have to be cleaned up. By and large, till today, most people do not have confidence. I'll give you another example. The other day, the Sexual Harassment Committee was deciding whether we should have the Bar Council to decide. You know, most lawyers said, no. This is a reality. You may have a lot of confidence. I don't have the confidence in the Bar Council. I'm saying that.
Okay, Dr. Dang and then Dr. Soy. Dr. Dang.
I think the medical councils are reasonably well cleaned up now. Yes, what Anand is saying is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
In the way that we have to regain the confidence of the people in them.
Yes.
It will take some time before people regain the confidence. And the first approach has to be to the medical councils. There's a small example. I'll come from a background lab medicine. You have a biopsy. Somebody can interpret it as tuberculosis and somebody can interpret it as a malignancy.
Yes.
Now who's going to decide that? Both are right. The difference between a lymph node showing a Hodgkin lymphoma or showing a tuberculosis is so great, there's such a thin grey line. If somebody calls a malignancy and somebody calls it tuberculosis, who's right, who's wrong?
Now, but here's the point. I want to pick up on that. And Dr. Dank earlier made a very important point that we haven't spoken about. The death of the general practitioner. The fact that you barely have GPs anymore. That you have only specialists. You have super specialists. You have a battery of tests. That old-fashioned thing of going to the doctor, having a conversation, that doctor knowing your history, that relationship between the doctor and the patient seems to have altered. The intimacy of that relationship seems dead.
Obviously, what they're saying to an extent is true, that the old art of medicine is dying. And it's all about investigations. But you see, you can't forget that we are all talking about standard of care ever since we started this discussion.
Yeah.
And in the current standard of care, for example, if somebody walks in with a lower abdominal pain, 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, you wouldn't have done any scan.
Yeah.
But today you have to do an ultrasound scan or a CT scan. So the standard of care has also changed.
But Dr. Soy, here the doctor will order the ultrasound before they feel the abdomen.
That is obviously incorrect.
That will happen more increasingly. If we overemphasize the blame.
The point that Dr. Dang is making about a differential diagnosis, this is a common, let's say, difference in opinion. It's not even an error. But what needs to be done then is that you have a protocol where there is a doubt, and I'm sure he does, that there is a second opinion.
But let's hear.
But they are not negligence, for sure.
Now here's the point. Let's hear from somebody who feels that his brother's death was a case of medical negligence. He's taken his case to the consumer court. He's taken his case to the medical council. Shishir Chand, your younger brother was feeling uneasy. He was experiencing some chest pain. He was taken to a hospital in Jamshedpur, and his ECG was taken, and the ECG was not seen to have any problem by the doctor who actually looked at that ECG. But the next day, your younger brother, who was just 33 years old, died of a heart attack. You believe this to be a case of medical negligence? You believe that that ECG was misread?
When this incident happened, I was in Delhi. I flew down to Jamshedpur, and this was a case of negligence as it appeared to me at the outset. So when I came back to Delhi after completing the final rites of my brother, I went around seeking expert medical advice on the ECG. And I came across this organization called PBT, People for Better Treatment.
And actually Kunal Saha is also with the same group. Just to make the point.
Now this proved to be a manna from heaven for me.
Yeah. You knew nobody there?
No. Okay. I just went to the website.
Okay.
I got a list of doctors' names who were willing to come forward and testify. So I wrote emails to all of these doctors. 2 of them came forward.
Indian doctors?
Indian doctors. they came forward, they read my report and they gave very detailed analysis.
And they believe that the ECG was completely misread.
Yes, it said there was an ST depression in lead V3 and V4 of the ECG, which would have prompted the doctor to admit my brother.
Also, there was a history of heart ailments in your family. Definitely. Your father had died of a heart attack at 44.
Correct. Now, when my brother reported to the emergency ward of this hospital, the doctor failed to probe the history of my family. Now, if you refer to Harrison textbook of medicine, it says history is the cornerstone of diagnosis of unstable angina, which my brother was suffering from.
Now, the hospital which we got in touch with said that when the postmortem was done, it found no history of heart problems in your brother, and they don't, of course, accept that there was any negligence. They've given us a detailed statement. You've seen that statement as well. Right. What would you say to the hospital? Because as you're hearing the doctors here saying, it's a very technical thing.
See, the ECG report on which the hospital is harping on is basically the interim report, which was generated the very next day my brother died. The final opinion was reserved till his viscera was sent to Ranchi, which is the state forensic lab. The final decision came, which was death due to cardiorespiratory failure due to heart disease, and it even says MI, which is myocardial infarction.
And when your brother went to the hospital, he was not asked about his family history?
No. So he was not probed about his family history. His BP was taken. His BP was high. It was 150 by 100, 150 systolic. No family history was taken. He was obese, and apart from that, as I said, there was discrepancies in the ECG. Despite that, the doctor misdiagnosed the ailment as gastric problem, gave him an injection called Buscopan, which is a pain relieving injection for abdominal pain, and gave him some tablets and asked him to return home. So he went
to office
the next day, again experienced the same chest pain, complained to his colleague. They decided to visit another hospital. Before he could meet the doctor at this new hospital, he suffered a massive cardiac arrest. He collapsed and died.
Anand Grover, here's the thing. And the thing is that these are families that they're not medically trained, but they have to devote their lives now to trying to understand medicine, trying to fight the good fight. Now, in his case, he has actually found doctors.
Well, there is a movement now. Even in Mumbai, you get some doctors like that. That's a good thing. But I wish him well, because it's going to be a difficult task. The delays, and I don't know whether he has a lawyer or not, it's very costly. I just wish him well. The time lag, you know, our judicial system has failed. If it's a civil court, just forget it. In the High Court of Bombay, where I come from, it is 20 years.
You want to say something?
Yeah. I'd like to add a point. I was just listening very intently on that Medical Council of India, how effective it has been. All state medical council has to act on a complaint of negligence and within 6 months and submit their report. In my case, my complaint with Bihar Medical Council is pending for 11 months running. I am not getting any response from Bihar.
Doctor, quick response and go to.
Very well taken. The justice is delayed. The time taken is much longer. 6 months nahi hote hain. It goes on to years and years. But so does the whole system, made by lawyers, made by judiciary. It works that, unfortunately. But here, before I say anything else, I will flip to the other side and say that there is a very old book, Doctor's Dilemma, written by George Bernard Shaw, where he says doctors suffer from a problem that they do not know how to say, I don't know.
And in the process end up making a costly mistake.
Sometimes land up making errors of judgment. One more thing I'd like to add is the mushrooming of substandard medical colleges.
Yes.
The MCI should tighten its grip to see that the quality of doctors which are coming out from the so-called private medical colleges are, and even so many government medical colleges, are as good as compared to the best.
Alright, we're taking a break. When we come back, last comments from our panel on the lessons that need to be learned to clean up the system without any witch hunting. Coming back in just a minute. On We the People, we're discussing how deep-seated medical negligence is and how do you make the medical community more accountable. Before we take final comments from our panel, let's take some questions from our audience.
I'm Subhash Rana, I'm a family physician. One day, I'm in my clinic. Just before I close my clinic, I get a patient who's about 40-50 years old. Now he comes with a chest pain and a little blood pressure which is slightly high. To be on the safe side, I told him, get an ECG done and come back to me, I'm waiting for you. So I waited for half an hour, he didn't come back. Then I rang up the nearby lab. They said he hadn't come. So I went home. Next day, his children come to me. They said, what have you done to our dad? I said, what happened? They said, he died last night. So I felt very sorry. I said, I had my prescriptions lying with him. So it was a matter of one person to another. Now there was no third person involved. So that's why in this connection I'd like to ask him whether he went all alone to the doctor. Probably the doctor must have informed him in some way that probably you should...
So in his case the doctor thought there was no problem with the ECG.
No, that's what we say.
Quickly you want to respond?
In fact, my brother was staying alone in Jamshedpur, so he went with his driver to an emergency ward at 10 in the night.
But you do raise this important point.
You see, this is if
in your case, did the family complain against you then?
The family came to me. See, I'm a family physician, so they had faith in me.
Okay.
So eventually, but then I felt sorry because I was feeling bad about it all. I wish he had gone there. It was just a matter of 5 minutes, there was a nursing home very nearby. But then he didn't. He said, let's put it off until tomorrow. That's why in his brother's case, probably the doctor must have told him or wouldn't have.
Well, we don't know, and he doesn't. He thinks otherwise. But yeah. I want to go. Amit, the case that is being told by Dr. Raina here is an important one. Sometimes we also say kal kar lenge, ya baad mein kar lenge, ya second opinion kar lenge.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's not as if all causes of deaths that should not have happened are because of medical negligence.
Yes.
I mean, nobody will argue that.
Yeah.
And we have a lot to learn as consumers, as patients, as well as the medical profession. But the important point here to understand is, in a way, the physician or the medical profession is responsible for raising expectations, and that is why I entirely agree with what Dr. Dank said earlier, that we should stop playing God. Medical science is fallible,
so
as
to learn
to
say we don't know.
If this message can be communicated with our patients, then it's a partnership that you can build with your patient rather than a hierarchy.
Let's take a question and then Dr. Guleria. Yeah.
Keeping a strict vigil over the medical council comes at a later stage. There are certain unreputed medical colleges that actually provide the medical licenses to students who do not have the necessary attendance as well as the appropriate marks. So we have to keep a strict check over over these medical colleges also.
Mr. Tosi, what are the learnings? Let's start taking last comments. What are the learnings?
For a medical professional to continue to be able to exercise uncluttered judgment, we must ensure that the doctor-patient relationship doesn't break down. And if we overemphasize the blame, I'm sorry, the doctor is not going to be able to do his best. He will always be watching his backside. Many a times unnecessary tests also will be prescribed. There will be delay in the treatment, which may not be in the best interest of the patient.
And Dr. Guleria, this constant complaint that you hear with patients that, long lines at hospitals, the shortages that Kavita has actually studied. We haven't even begun to speak about what happens in government hospitals. Now you've actually worn both hats. You're in private hospital today, but you've been at AIIMS. I mean, what, 8,000 patients in the OPD every day, 700 plus surgeries every single day. It's a collapse of the public health system. I mean, isn't that at the heart of this problem?
Absolutely. I think there's an absolute collapse of the system, and like Madam said, if there's no oxygen, there are no nurses, there's nothing, it's very, very difficult to deliver quality care. Number one, the queues, ma'am. The queues for everything are endless. I think all this adds up to an absolute lack of faith in the people in the healthcare system. And I think we need to work on that. We need to work on the regulatory bodies to regulate them, to regulate the people better, because people must have faith in the profession.
Let me just get a last question here.
I'm Dr. Bose. I'm a surgeon practicing in Gurgaon for last 20 years. My patients are my best judge because they are my brand ambassador. The only secret is you have to gain the faith of your patient, and you must tell your limitations. Even God has made so many mistakes, and that is the reason why we have congenital anomalies.
Yeah, I think you're making that important point, Anand. I think that's honest there. That just be willing to say it as badly as it is.
Well, I agree with Amit. I think we need to develop a partnership. Till now, it's been God. Till now, it's been a dominant-subordinate relationship. In order to gain confidence, I think this whole notion of consent should be actually on an equalizing basis, and that surgeon there has actually indicated that he spends time with his patients. Most doctors do not, and if you don't have the time, like in the case, you have to have other methods. I remember in AIIMS, in the ARV scenario, this was a major problem, HIV patients. We built up systems. We had patients who are HIV themselves who actually helped in counseling.
That's a very important point. Let's take a last question here.
Doctors' reputation is everything to them, and so when some patients become the statistics that show things don't work, they're bound to be emotionally surcharged. So if the laws favor doctors, it's probably because
people are too emotional when they come.
So the laws have to perfect the balance.
Meera, do you accept that, you know, loss is so difficult to deal with, but on the other hand, you also hear these, and that I think nobody here will defend, you know, when a towel is left inside or a forceps, I mean, that is, I think these are not even things to debate. But where do you balance the deep emotionalism of somebody who's lost somebody they love and may see negligence just because that person couldn't live with actual negligence?
The health literacy, the issue, it's so low. Till things get bad and you rush. And you know, it's a desperate situation. The second concern is like, you know, the medical negligence that takes place at a larger level. Never asking a woman if she's having her periods. Because if someone is pregnant, there are certain drugs you're not supposed to give. Because you said, normally the good Lord. No, it's not the good Lord. Medical education, medical ethics, is it taught? No, it is not taught. So and if you are going to allow firms and companies to open medical colleges with very high capitation fee, only those who have pots and pots of money, whether they are interested in, you know, serving or not, are the ones that are going to do that to make money.
Now nobody's saying that, you know, profit is necessarily the root cause of possible negligence, but the point being made here that when profit making becomes the pursuit of medical institutions, then automatically the same standards will not be met.
Is it surprising that majority of the lawsuits and litigation is with private hospital doctors? Do government hospital doctors don't make mistakes? What happens is when the patient walks into a private hospital and he pays a certain amount of money and expects to get cured, if the outcome is adverse, they feel they have not got a good deal. So a lot of the litigation...
It's also because it's the poorest who go to the government hospitals. The poorest who go, and you can't sue under the Consumer Act because it's not a service, you're not paying.
So that statistic is not valid at all.
I'm trying to make a different point. So when the guy pays money and the outcome is adverse, they think they've got shortchanged, they didn't get their money's worth. So some of the medical negligence litigation is perceived negligence. If you want to take a simple message home, the right treatment should be given at the right hospital by the right doctor. Hospitals of various levels, government and private, should be certified to do a certain level of treatment and no more. They should refer. That's one. The doctors have to have continuous medical education. That's called CME in our parlance. And they have to have proper accreditation for all procedures. There is no re-accreditation system every 5 or 10 years. That has to happen. So I think this will also prevent medical negligence.
Okay, I'm just going to end by asking just randomly this young man sitting next to me, what do you expect when you go to a doctor?
I expect to get cured, and I expect that, you know, whatever I am today, I come out without, just like that, not without a kidney or not without something's missing from inside me.
So when you hear doctors here saying that sometimes don't think we're God, what would you say to that?
Well, I'm not thinking that you're God, but I certainly don't expect that, you know, from a country that's pioneering doctors and engineers all over the world. I don't expect you to have negligence. And you
of a very blatant kind, Kavita, come in there.
Two quick remedial measures. One is more tactical, which is data. You know, what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. And the data is made up and messed up, you know, and mucky, a lot of the things that we even see, you know, as an academic institution. And the second, you know, we the people need to start putting public health and health as an electoral debate point. I mean, we need to ask for health. If Anna Hazare can put corruption on that debate, why are we not putting health on that?
Or if Obamacare can be the biggest election issue in the United States of America, why is healthcare not an election issue?
Why is Rahul Gandhi and Modi not telling us what they're going to do for health? I mean, it's about time.
Very important point. Dr. Dang, and the last word to Anand Grover.
Well, I must say that Dr. Sohan has summed it up very, very well. The sanctity of the medical profession must be maintained. The confidence of the patients in the doctors must increase. And that can be only done if, the medical profession is no more under the gambit of the Consumer Forum.
You don't want the Consumer Act to apply?
I do not want the medical profession under the Consumer Forum.
Isn't it a service?
Because, because
when you pay large amounts of...
Because medicine is not a business, it's a service.
But sir, if medicine is not a business, then should profit making be its aim?
Medicine is not essentially meant to make profit. It's essentially a service industry. It's not a business industry. And I think anybody who joins medicine to make money is doing the wrong thing. It's not a profession.
Anybody joining medicine to make money is doing the wrong thing.
It's not a profession
to
make money.
All of us we became doctors because we wanted to become doctors. Because we were all toppers in our class.
Does this generation become doctors because they want to, or to be rich also?
I can't say about the current generation, yes, but the scenario is definitely changing. Why? Because we are under the Consumer Protection Act.
How does a citizen petition for justice?
Like the gentleman over there said, what I think most of us are bothered about is our reputation.
Okay.
Barkha, there are bad lawyers, there are good lawyers, there are good journalists, there are bad journalists.
I agree.
Even there are good politicians.
I agree. I actually agree on the last point, but I'm raising a question on taking away the Consumer Protection Act. Anand Grover, last word to you.
I won't agree with that. I think there's a major structural problem with the medical profession. It's become, a conveyor belt. In order to avoid surgeries and tertiary medicine, primary health care has to be talked about. And that is totally neglected. All these new colleges, who's giving them the permission? The Medical Council of India. And we know why that is happening. Please clean your act and gain confidence. I tell you, Bar Council of India, I'm a lawyer, all around people are only interested in making money.
Yeah. Unfortunately, now people become doctors to profit in the dowry market. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why people want to become doctors, especially in private medical colleges.
Okay, I have to end, but there is...
Profit for doctors never was, never can be the end. Absolutely not. Doctors need to, live as well. But the thing is, they work in a private institution, some of them work in a private institution, and there will be a profit. But that's not the end, that's not the reason they exist.
But let's end it here with saying that there needs to be deeper examination of many of these issues. I think we can't all say all is well, because clearly all is not as well as it should be. And clearly the biggest thing that we can all agree on is that when trust gets broken, it should be imperative to a doctor to rebuild it. We leave it there with all of these questions, some of them answered, some of them for another time. Thank you very much. Thank you.